Today we have Kashish with us. Kashish, honestly, इसके पहले मेरा कशिश का काफ़ी brief introduction हुआ था and he is one of the smartest people I know, at least in our age. And ये podcast बहुत value packed है. Even I visited it once, especially for beginners जिनको personal finance, wealth creation के बारे में एकदम जानना है. They want to get up to speed. मेरे को 4-5 दोस्तों ने फ़ोन किया था कि मैं स्टार्ट कहाँ से करूँ. स्टार्ट करना है तो मैं स्टार्ट यहाँ से करो. टू बी वेरी ऑनेस्ट, ये बहुत वैल्यू पैक्ड है और कशिश का चैनल का लिंक मैं डिस्क्रिप्शन में छोड़ दूंगा. नॉट बिकॉज ही इज़ अ गुड फ्रेंड बट ऑल्सो बिकॉज आपको काफ़ी वैल्यू मिलेगी. एंड विदाउट एनी फर्दर अडू, चलिए शुरू करते हैं. सब्सक्राइब कर देना बस. बाय.
Why should I even invest? Like when I get my paycheck, I can easily, I'm young, I'm in my 20s, I can splash it off, I can buy the latest things, I can show up to my friends. Why should I even invest?
So there is no incentive for you to invest, absolutely. But as Ben Graham has also said, as any financial planner that you'll go to say, is you can't really work throughout your life. And for you to sustain this sort of sustain this state of living, these high expenses that you've been incurring, you're gonna have to work throughout. You can't simply do that. Like, that's unrealistic. And you also cannot cherish retirement, because for you to retire, you must have enough money for you to sustain yourself, right? For you to do that, you're gonna have to save and have to invest. Otherwise, you're gonna just stay a very cocky, a very self-centered, young but poor guy. You'll never become wealthy, right? And I think that's good enough reason. But then again, people don't really understand, because instant gratification oftentimes cloud their judgment, which is extremely, I'd say, unwise and dangerous as well.
Right. I'll add two and three more things. The first one is that, for most people don't have the privilege to work in a job they love. Most people, they mostly work for money. So it's best to, invest the most you can, live below your means, so you have enough for, to gain financial freedom, so you don't have to work for the money. The second one is compounding. If you start investing at 20 and if you start investing at 30, it will have more than double the, difference at 60 when you're about to retire. Okay, so let's begin with finances for college students. Or how, the thing is, what I've noticed is, actually I was fortunate enough to be exposed to Naval Ravikant and people like that early on, to know more about wealth creation and everything. But the average 18-year-old or 20-year-old doesn't know that. And there are a lot of, misconceptions in the brain regarding to wealth, money, finances. So let's begin with that.
Fine. So I'm assuming that the question here pertains to the fact that how does an 18-year-old get exposed to this world, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a like a step-by-step process through which somebody can get exposed to. It's purely a matter of luck. Just the way you managed to tumble upon the likes of Naval Ravikant. I first read Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad back when I was 18, right? So it's all a matter of luck and your willingness to learn new things. And eventually, as more and more you learn, you realize that all of these things do sort of take us to the same path of wealth creation, the way that Naval Ravikant or Rich Dad Poor Dad's Robert Kiyosaki talks about creating wealth and creating value for people around, being an investor and all of that. So I don't think there's something that anybody can do. Just continue learning as much as possible. Just listen to extremely wealthy people and you'll realize that what is the exact path.
Also, one more thing I realized is that, wealth creation is sort of looked upon as a status game. For example, if someone got wealthy, he must have done something evil or he took something from me. And I don't know why this is, but for example, if you take a king from 400 years ago, an average man today is living a better life than that. But yet, when someone climbs up the ladder or tries to do something or creates wealth in another way, why do that thing happens.
So I think the main reason this is the case because people still don't know that wealth creation is not a zero sum game.
Yeah.
It's not a status driven game basically. Politics is a status driven game. Wealth creation is not a zero sum game. It's when if you are creating wealth, you aren't doing it alone, and that is exactly what even Naval Ravikant says in his journal, and even Eric Jorgensen's book of the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, where he explicitly mentions that when you're actually creating wealth, you're also creating jobs for people around you, and therefore sort of augmenting and sort of pulling them out of poverty as well, sort of helping them raise their standard of living as well. Therefore, whatever you do is not a result of the fact that the person who's creating wealth is actually stealing it away from somebody else, compared to politics, compared to a game which is status driven, wherein for you to be a winner, there's got to be some loser. But this is not the case with wealth creation. So, to answer the question, the main reason why this happens is primarily because people themselves do not understand this game of wealth so well enough for them to differentiate between what's right and what's wrong. So, I just think it's a matter of financial illiteracy, which is the reason why people get involved in such things.
Right, and also a funny thing happened a few weeks ago. It was sort of a seminar of some really big CEO of a asset management company, and about 100 people were there, and luckily I was invited to it as well. And what he told was that mostly people on Wall Street, and they use this specific jargon or things in or say things in a complicated way. So the average consumer gives them their money and they make more money out of it. So I think this also because of the lack of financial literacy.
Yeah, totally. So finance and investing isn't supposed to be as difficult as Wall Street or Dalal Street have made it, right?
Right.
Investing, like to sum up the whole game of wealth creation, it's just spend less than you earn, invest rest everything, and forget about it. You just got to follow this 3-step process, and you need not invest in highly complex financial instruments. Just invest in a vanilla index fund maybe, and just forget it, and see your wealth compound immensely. All of these financial jargons are only meant to complicate the whole process for the sake of creating alpha, which itself is a very arbitrary term. But then again, I think they too are right in some ways or the others. They like some good asset managers are able to create the alpha and create wealth for their employees, for their clients. But then again, rest all of it is BS. Rest majority of it is BS. Only a very small sum of people have made a huge amount of alpha, have created huge amount of alpha for their clients. Rest all of them just trail the index. So simplicity, as like you would have come across this first principle called Occam's razor, right? The simpler the things, the better it is.
Right.
And the same thing applies to life and even investing. The simpler your investment process, the simpler is your way to create wealth, the easier it is for you and for the people around. So I think, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Also on the topic of index funds, let's just continue down that tangent. The frequent thing I hear with, especially with elderly people, is that let's try to outperform the market, or let's put in a mutual fund, and hopefully there is some smart guy sitting there who will probably outperform the market. But I think yesterday only I read a statistic that most of mutual funds, most of actively managed funds fail to outperform the index fund. So let's make a small comparison between index funds, mutual funds, and small case as well. Small case is a great product.
So you want me to talk about them, right?
Yeah.
So index funds are like, so for us to understand index funds, we got to understand what an index is. Index is a stock. It's a basket of all these great companies, usually ranked by a basis of their market capitalization, and all of them just combined. So when you're investing in an index fund, you're basically investing in all of these companies, and the investment procedure is devoid of any sort of human intervention because all of it is mathematically, it's just there. All of us know which the top 50 companies are, and you just invest in them. Compared to a mutual fund wherein, compared to a mutual fund where a lot of active management comes into play, wherein there's a manager investing money on your behalf, choosing the right stocks, and that's how, and thus they charge an asset management fee, all the expense ratio in stock market lingo, compared to, let's say, small case. So small case is also sort of a very unique product, I'd say, wherein they also sort of try to provide the services of an mutual fund, sort of creating a basket of stocks following sort of investment thesis. But then again, the expense ratio and the investment structure that the expense structure that they follow is slightly different. But all in all of these are just financial products to be used by end consumers, for people like you and me to invest in the stock market, right? And choosing the one, it doesn't matter whether you choose, let's say, an index fund, a small case, or a mutual fund. What matters is how passionate about you, and how sort of confident you feel while investing in it. Because oftentimes, whenever fear strikes the market, you tend to flee away, and then you stop the process of compounding. So it doesn't matter whether you let your money compound in index fund, mutual fund, or small case. Just let it compound for long enough time for you to actually generate wealth. Because compounding isn't a matter of 3 to 5 years; it's a matter of decades. And you should be comfortable with the product you're investing in. If it's not an index fund, if it's a small case of your favorite registered investment advisor, just go with it. But then again, stick with it through thick and thin. I think that's what matters the most.
Right. Even I have the same process that, first, properly analyze and see how good that instrument is, and then just invest in it and forget about it. Because what mostly happens is that, for example, if we recall, last year March, market dipped heavily, everyone took out their money, and the smart ones actually put in more money when it was dipping. So, putting in your emotions and thinking to make a quick buck can actually result in harming you.
Absolutely.
And but let's begin with the actual theme of the podcast, which is around personal finances. Also, for the viewers, Kashish also has a YouTube channel with thousands of subscribers, and he also spreads, he's like giving education for early financial freedom. So I recommend all of you to check him. I'll put the link up here. And let's begin with, personal finance planning's basics.
Okay, so I started devising a personal finance plan for myself, and after having read a lot of books, read a lot of articles, consuming a lot of content basically in this domain, I squared in on a simple 6-step process that I follow. Right. So these 6 steps, just to sum it up, is having a good source of multiple incomes, saving that money, then paying off your debt, providing for enough emergencies, investing, and then tax management. So when I talk about earning enough money, I also talk about you should have multiple sources of income. You should not primarily just depend on your job. Maybe have a side gig, maybe have a business of your own, so that there are multiple sources, and you can this sort of acts as a safety net, especially when during times of crisis, just like the one we saw last year. A lot of people did have to were laid off from their job. Second, saving is super important. Doesn't matter how much you make, till the time you don't save it, you're as broke as your poor neighbor till the time you're spending 110% of what you earn, which is like totally stupid. Then comes off to paying off your debt. The only way for you to have a positive net worth is when you have zero debt. You don't owe anybody any money. So just stay away from debt whenever possible. You can use leverage, let's say, to start your business maybe, but then again, that's a very separate thing. I am not that smart, and majority of people aren't. So don't overestimate your ability to use leverage to your advantage. Just stay away from it at all times. Then creating an emergency, providing for emergencies. Under this, I talk about 2 things: having an emergency fund, and also having yourself insured. So have a good health insurance, have a good life insurance, and create an emergency fund of around 6 to 9 months of your expense, and keep it parked in a liquid fund it's easily accessible. Once you've done all this, then you start investing, because investing is just one part of your whole financial plan. And then you start investing. Again, follow a simple process. If you don't know anything, just choose a couple of mutual funds, just 2 of them. Choose a good index fund with low cost index fund, and just continue investing in them through thick and thin. And finally, after you've made a lot of money, you've done investments, it's also important that you save a lot of tax. You don't want to pay what you've rightfully earned to the government. I mean, obviously, don't do it illegally. Know your way around. But then again, also make sure that you don't end up paying more than you have to. So just follow these 6 simple steps, and each step also sort of keep it as simple as possible. try charting down each of these steps on a single page. And if your financial plan exceeds that one page, then I think it's way too complicated. So just don't overcomplicate things. That's pretty much it. That's how I approach personal finance.
Right. Also on the topic of saving tax, let's can you share more about income tax harvesting specifically and other methods as well?
Okay. So I really haven't researched a lot about it per se, but then again, there are a lot of deductions that you can claim, deductions under ATC. Uh, Primarily this, which ensures that you don't pay income tax at least for the first 6 lakh of income that you earn per year. As far as income tax harvesting goes, so it's a very awesome concept that I heard, which allows you to defer your capital gain taxes, let's say a couple more years. So it's just simple. If you earn a capital gain on your investments and you sell it, the amount of profit that you earn is supposed to be taxed. It depends whether it's taxed as per short-term capital gain or long-term capital gain. No need to get into it, but you must know that each time you make a profit by selling your investments, you have to incur some tax. How to ideally, the only way to avoid them is defer them. So just do not sell them ever. Just do not sell your investments unless it's like really, really necessary. But if you do have to sell them, ensure you can defer it. How do you defer it? How do you leverage this concept called harvesting, capital gain harvesting? What you can do is, if let's say, for example, one of your investments is not doing well and it's down 30-40%, what you can do is just before you filing your ITR, you just sell it off and immediately buy it, so that instead of having a capital gain, you have a capital loss. And now this capital loss can be offset for future capital gains if you do incur in, let's say, next couple of years. So this is a very complex, it's a very complex thing wherein special provisions have been mentioned in Income Tax Act. But what you must know is simple as that: don't incur any sort of tax. Even if you are incurring, let's say, long-term capital gain tax, try offsetting it by booking your losses at the end of each year, if it's really a considerable amount, so that you can save let's say a buck or two on your income tax payments.
Right. And also, like you mentioned, the stat board, and like last year in lockdown, I was like pretty bored with my JEE preparations and all, and I randomly picked up this book, the stat board, and that was like the first time a switch flipped in my mind. Oh shit! Even can we think this way? Is this possible? And the biggest thing which was mentioned a lot of times was that first thing was pay yourself first, so we'll expand on that. And the secondly was to gain financial literacy. But again, the thing is, Robert Kiyosaki himself in a twisted way mentioned in the book that most people don't go behind chasing financial literacy, rather they work hard for the money. So let's dive into that.
Sure. So as far as paying yourself goes first, right? Like it's very, very common. Oftentimes we have been paying others throughout. Like we pay for our groceries, we pay for our car, we pay for our TV subscription, our Netflix subscription, whatnot. We've been paying others, but then again, that is a reason why we ourselves are not growing, and our wealth and our income isn't also growing. That's when Robert Kiyosaki put forth a simple concept: rather than paying others, pay yourself first and then spend the rest. So when you talk about paying yourself, it can be either through investing, paying yourself for the future, or buying good books to read, buying good courses for you to learn from. And these small steps sort of ensure that you yourself as an individual grow, and your wealth and income also grows proportionately. So that's one thing. And what was the second thing that you mentioned?
The second one was that Robert Kiyosaki often has said in his book for every individual to gain financial literacy.
Yeah. So this is also very important. So the problem here is that people often think that working hard for money is gonna make them financially independent. But if you look at the world's richest people, they didn't become rich because they got this salary from a company they were working at. They only got rich because they were owners and they were investors in businesses, in good quality assets, right? And the reason I think this is a problem also because of in our education system, we're always sort of forced and sort of hardwired in a way for us to be good job seekers and job performers, right? And which is also a reason why a lot of people, even if they don't have interest in let's say engineering or medical, they do opt for these because they know that being a doctor pays well, being a good engineer from a top institute does pay well. But this is wrong. Even if you do get paid well, if you are not financially literate, you'll end up being a sucker throughout your life. To quote Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money, he says that uh, all these people who have windfall gains, let's say you win a lottery ticket, or all these NBA athletes who made a lot of money during their 20s, during their peak career, after the income stops coming in, they just go broke. Because no matter how good they were at their skill, they lacked one super important skill called financial literacy. So without financial literacy, there is simply no way for you to become wealthy. And this is why I think Robert Kiyosaki emphasizes on it a lot, to learn financial literacy. Rest everything will eventually fit in places for you.
Like with the athlete example, one of the greatest boxers of all time, Mike Tyson, he earned like $300 million over the span of his career, and just after a few years he was bankrupt and he was actually 30 million in debt. So that sums up that. And also, like there's a lot more original thought. Again, Naval Ravikant theorist, this is here. And the thing is that he mentioned in a very succinct way that you will never get rich renting out your time. You must own a piece of equity. And while I do realize that, not everyone is cut out for running their own business, because a lot of people had been, their personality traits are like that. But the least we can do is, just study about, finances, investing, and just own a piece of business indirectly.
Absolutely. I think that's how not so exceptional businessmen do make money. As I said, the richest people in the world are businessmen, right? Because they own their businesses and they've been running it, and they don't draw money from their business from the form of salary, but from a profit that it generates, right? And that is how they actually became wealthy. But as you said very rightly, not everybody can be a businessman. Not everybody has the skill or craft for it. But still, for you to become wealthy, all you have to do is own a piece of businesses being led by all these people. You don't have to be Elon Musk to become as rich as him. You can simply invest in Tesla, right? I mean, that's a very crude way of saying things, but then again, that's how actually things happen. You don't have to be as good as Warren Buffett. Just invest in Berkshire Hathaway and let your money compound. That's worked out extremely well for people. Same goes for, let's say, Amazon. You don't have to be as good as Jeff Bezos. You don't have to be a visionary. You can be a guy like Nick Sleep, who had a lot of conviction in Jeff Bezos, which is why he invested 50% of his net worth in Amazon way back, and now he too is a billionaire, just because he made one right bet on one right person. So that's how even you can make money. You don't have to be a good businessman at all.
Yeah, right. Also, one strange thing I noticed is that I like studying and reading these books, especially on investing. And what I saw is that the advice or the mental models which have been used in investing books, they apply such really well in your life that you end up taking better decisions. So not only investing makes you better financially, but also a better person overall.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you here. So there's a very famous quote. I don't know who said it, but it's said that a lot of times people are drawn to Buffett and are drawn to Omaha for investing advice, and they visit Omaha for the annual Berkshire Hathaway meeting, but they always leave with worldly wisdoms that the duo Munger and Buffett has to offer. So we always come, like, even I got attracted to investing as a way for me to earn a lot of money and become wealthy. But the only reason I'm sticking to it is not because of this, because investing is not so difficult. Investing is very simple. But the reason we stick to it, the reason we continue learning from these legends, is because the paramount amount of life advice that they give. And these life advices are also very simple. Stay within your means, be humble, don't overestimate your abilities, do not be greedy. Be greedy when others are fearful, be fearful when others are greedy. Always be ready, so that whenever the opportunity comes, you can leverage that opportunity to your advantage. Some very basic things that apply to both investing and life. And that's how everybody must lead life, which is why even I insist a lot of people to learn investing and embrace this extremely holistic concept as put forth by Buffett.
Right, totally. Also, like let's just sprinkle a little bit of light on um, what things do you look on when you are fundamentally analyzing a company. Like obviously, fundamental analysis many people might not know. It is basically you looking at the company's past numbers and the quality of their management, the quality of their owners, and everything to make a decision if you want to invest to that company or not. So, what are like the different things, like modes is one of them, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. So I've divided my investment process in 4 different steps. First step is financial analysis, wherein we just look at. So this acts as a first screener for me. This acts as a screen because eventually I just can't read about 5,000 plus businesses listed in India. I've got to have a screen. So I have a very simple screen wherein I don't invest. I only invest in companies which have good growth, which don't have any debt, which has very high cash conversion of profits. Some very simple filters which ensure that I do not waste my time on extremely poor businesses, and also it should have high return on capital. So this is my first step, financial analysis, which helps me screen all these businesses. Once I've screened it, then I go for second step, which is business and industry analysis. So now I start to understand what is its business model, where does a company lie in its whole universe of competitors, let's say, doing a proper Porter 5 force analysis maybe, and all sorts of things, and also focusing on moats, ensuring that it is able to sustain its high return on capital over years. Once I'm done with this, if I'm happy with its business model and its industry positioning, then I go for my third step, which is management analysis. Because it doesn't matter how good a business is, if the management is not shareholder friendly, they'll never allow the value to create for shareholders. So look for good managers who've been in the business for decades, let's say, and who've been extremely shareholder friendly, not getting involved in any naughty things, not going for accounting gimmickry of sorts. Once I'm gone through all these 3 filters, then finally I go valuing a company. I don't pay a lot of attention and a lot of detail to valuing a company because oftentimes, like almost all the times, the valuations will be wrong. This is what the Dean of Valuation, Aswad Damodaran himself says. But then again, we must have some sort of benchmark, some sort of reference point to refer to when we're investing. So I then do a rough back of the envelope valuation calculation to know whether or not this business is extremely overpriced or not. And after doing all these 4 things, if I'm comfortable with the price, then I buy. If I'm not comfortable with the price, I just wait. I just wait till the time the price doesn't come to what I am comfortable with. And when it comes, like when it did in March 2020, I buy a lot of business. I just go on a shopping spree. So 4 steps. Do the first 3 steps to know whether or not you are interested in the business. 4th step, just to give you a reference point, and then just wait. Wait for the business to come at the price point you are comfortable with.
Also, one more thing, I'd like to share, especially with the viewers, is that often most investors or most people who would like to invest, there's a subtle difference between those two. What happens mostly is that, we run behind the prices. For example, last time Adani was rising, so everyone flocking towards it. Let's buy Adani. And what I rather advise to people is, or what I would rather believe for myself, is that pricing follows the fundamentals and not the other way around. And next, let's take up the goal planning. Like, for example, throughout our life we will have multiple goals, right? Marriage, children's marriage, and the education, our first home, our car, and everything. So let's just look at it in the process of goal planning towards these things.
So absolutely. So I use a tool called goalteller.com. So it's a company that I interned with as well. They have an awesome product which allows you to come up with all these goals, and they just basically build a timeline for you, your whole life timeline in accordance with the goals and your net worth, how it fluctuates over time as and when you are achieving these goals. So the whole process is ki if you are extremely good at Excel, let's say, then just try doing it yourself. Otherwise, just reach out to a good financial planner or maybe a website like Goalteller, because they simplify a process a lot for you. Because you will spend a lot of time trying to make sense of things you don't understand well enough. It's better you outsource. Doesn't matter you pay, let's say, 1,000, 2,000 or 5,000 for a consultation call. But then again, they lay out a plan in such a way which ensures that your goals will be met, and they'll also recommend a lot of things as well. So I think you should approach your whole this thing in this way.
Right. And also, like, one thing which I learned was that, for example, if my goal is, let's say, 10 years away, let's say I am planning for my first car maybe, or something like that, or something which is 10 years away. Okay, so I should rather put that money in equity, hope for, realistic returns. Like on paper I can say I'll get 20% returns, but that is not possible, and at the end it will only end up harming me later. So for tax they adjusted realistic returns, and then when about 3 years are left, when you think the market is at a peak of a bull run or something like that, take it out and put it in a safer thing, for example bonds and everything. So it still increases, but it's in a liquid form that you can take it out whenever you want. And also one more concept I read is by Benjamin Graham. It was a little story that, for example, we have three brothers, okay, and suppose they have to split chocolate, or let us say Coca-Cola, okay. So if A, B, and C, three brothers, if A is actually splitting, so A will be the last one to choose. So he has incentive to put equal amount in all three of them. So similarly, whenever I read this, that whenever you get a paycheck or whenever you get money, okay, you can have three people inside of you. One is the current you, which wants instant gratification, which wants the latest iPhone. The next one is you, but 10 years later, who would be a little bit older and a little bit wiser. The third one is you at retirement who cannot work. And because the retirement person will choose last, he should decide how to divide that three parts.
It's wonderful. I totally agree with it. That's very, very nicely put by Ben Graham.
Common mistakes or myths which people do with their personal finance planning. Like the first one is definitely not having patience. And water, can you sprinkle a little bit of light on it?
So absolutely, yeah, patience is one thing, and also the fact that people don't take financial seriously also, and often feel it's very complicated. It isn't. It isn't supposed to be. As I said, just follow a six-step plan maybe, and then try charting it out on a piece of paper. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So that's one thing. Also, the fact that people often confuse financial planning with investments. Investments is just one step of financial planning, and all of these steps that I mentioned, all of them are equally important. Saving is equally important, paying off debt is equally important, and it's not important for you to be an extremely good investor to achieve financial independence or have a really good financial plan. No, you must equally pay attention to all of these steps, all of these pillars in each and every aspect, and try to master any one of those. I know for a fact that I'm not a really good investor, but I know that I can be very frugal. I have a lot of patience when it comes to saving, so I can use that to my advantage. At the same time, also focus some time on saving, some time on investing, maybe some time on managing my taxes and ensuring that I have a good emergency plan and stuff like that. So yeah, that's how I think one should approach. And this is a myth that I feel people often confusing investing with personal financial planning.
So let's say the FIRE movement, the financial independence retire early movement, is actually really popular in US, but in India it's about to pick up its pace. I think maybe in 2 or 3 years it will be really famous. So let's just shed some light on the FIRE movement and how can, or the basic tenets or pillars of that.
So yeah, FIRE movement eventually just started primarily because people realized that they can't work throughout, and also as you mentioned that people oftentimes are not fortunate enough to be working in the same field that they really enjoy, and oftentimes work is a burden for them. They simply don't want to do it throughout their life, right? Which is why this movement started FIRE, like financial independence and retiring early. The whole intention was it for you to retire early so that you can enjoy the things that you wished for without having to worry about work. That is how it started, and the basic tenets are same as personal finance: saving most of the money that you make, not overspending, living a very frugal life, leading a very minimalistic life, investing most amount of your income, and just letting it compound, starting as early as possible as well. And as soon as you reach that financial independence goal, and there's a crucial rule here, the 4% rule, which is dividing your yearly expenses, like your expected yearly expenses, by 4%. Now, once you divide, let's say I have an yearly expense of 1 lakh, assuming, and I divide it by 4%, I get 25 lakh. So my financial independence number will be 25 lakh. What does it mean? Once I have amassed enough net worth that it reaches 25 lakh, I can now easily retire with having a withdrawal rate of, let's say, 3%. I withdraw 3% of my portfolio each year, assuming that my portfolio increases at an on-market return of 7%, which ensures that I am earning I'm able to sustain my lifetime in perpetuity without actually hurting my whole investment portfolio. So this is a crucial rule, I'd say. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, that was actually 2.5 crores and not 25 lakhs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But actually, like, for example, if I've got 2.5 crores, okay, and for example, if my yearly expense is 10 lakhs, so would you suggest that I put all of it into an index fund, or I structure in some way?
Yeah, so I actually did make a video on this wherein I created a financial independence calculator using Excel, wherein you just need to input a couple of inputs, around 7 to 8, and it computes the whole thing. So the whole rationale is, since you're saving for retirement is, let's say, at least a decade. At least for people like me, it's at least a 10-20 years ka goal, right? Since it's too far, you can safely invest in equity, or in other words, oftentimes said, a riskier investment, right? So you can invest, but then again, as soon as you mentioned earlier as well, that as soon as you're reaching that goal, let's say the goal is 3 years down the line, you start shifting that from equity to debt, let's say, and keeping it in more liquid form, so that even if your equity portfolio does get subjected to market crashes, your lifestyle isn't affected a lot. So I did make a whole calculator. If the audience wants to go visit that, that'd be awesome. But the idea remains the same. If it's a long-term goal, stay invested in equity. If you need the money next, let's say, 3 years, then it's ideal for you to just transfer that money from equity to more safer options. Let's say a liquid fund, or maybe in a sweep-in facility with your bank. So yeah, that's what is important.
Also, one more thing that often we hear that personal finance and wealth creation is more of a behavior game, and you should know yourself first. So why is that? Like, why should I, pay attention to my tendencies and everything before I invest?
Absolutely. So because, see, the reason you're investing is for yourself, right? You are not investing to get the highest returns. You are investing to get financially independent, and financial independence is a very personal thing, right? So there's a concept of, let's say, risk adjusted returns. Everybody's familiar with it. You aim to get highest returns assuming least amount of risk. But there's also a concept called stress adjusted returns. What does it mean? That you as an investor are earning highest amount of returns adjusted for stress. Let's say you're invested in a highly volatile asset, let's say cryptocurrency or a Bitcoin, and since it's highly volatile, you get stressed a lot seeing your portfolio value going up and down so randomly, at such a fast pace. This increases a lot of stress for you, which is why you may end up taking a very bad decision by exiting a market at a point where you shouldn't have. Right? So even if you made the right decision of investing in right asset, because of your behavioral biases, you ended up taking a bad decision for yourself, right? And since all of this is revolving around you, it's important for you to understand who you are, what sort of risk you can assume, how risk averse you are you comfortable with this or not, and then take all the decisions when it comes to investing personal finance. Which is why I feel, for us to be a better investor, we must first understand ourselves, and then maybe start understanding businesses and start investing in them.
Definitely, man. I have like 2 points on this. First one is FOMO. Like, we perpetually live, our generation itself, invests based on FOMO, and we, in fact, we do dumb stuff just for FOMO. And I have actually seen many of my friends investing in crypto when, because I was doing it, because someone else was doing it and making money. And when the market tanked a few months ago, they lost a lot of it. So, like, the worst thing would be for you to invest in FOMO. And secondly, this thing which you mentioned, which, when we are stressed about a portfolio going down, we take really bad decisions. It's actually, psychologically backed that when you get stressed, cortisol release in your brain, and then your logical side of brain actually, slows down, gets a little bit shut off, and you end up taking, more dumber decisions.
Absolutely.
And also, like, let's begin with linking assets or our personal finance plans, financial goals with our long-term goals, or how do we link the assets with our goals?
So yeah, it's pretty simple. You start with your goals. What sort of goal do you have? We'll again go back to the principle and concept both of us have now talked about. If this goal is more than 5 years away from us, we can invest in an asset, and you should start earmarking your portfolio for a specific goal that you have. I currently am 20, and let's say by the age of 25, I want to buy a really awesome car which is going to cost me, let's say, 50 lakh, right? So I know for a fact that 5 years down the line I'm going to need 50 lakh, and since it is 5 years down the line, I can assume a bit risk, because no matter how volatile the market will be, I know 5 years down the line, my equity return, my equity portfolio, or equity in general as an asset class will give decent returns. So now I'll earmark some portion of my portfolio just for this goal. And as soon as I'm approaching that 5-year goal mark, I'll sort of transfer a good amount of that money in my liquid fund, so that now that my capital is safe, and then go look out. Same goes for any other goal for that matter. If that goal is, let's say you want to pursue an MBA 2 years down the line, you cannot invest in equity at all. So you start saving, and you save a lot of money and start putting it in your liquid funds, and earmarking that portfolio, that portion of your portfolio, just for this, so that you don't either withdraw a lot of money from it because that's not meant for the reason you're investing. Also, don't over invest because there are other goals as well. So being very disciplined in this way, knowing what you're doing and why you're doing, ensures that you have a good financial plan which is very systematic and helps you ensure that all your goals that you have are easily fulfilled.
Also, what do you mean by, like, earmarking? What does it
Earmarking.
exactly mean?
So earmarking is sort of defining. Let's say I have a $1 crore portfolio. Out of that, 10 lakh dollars or 10 lakh rupees is just meant for my retirement. So that all sort of contributions made in that 10 lakh portfolio is just for my retirement, and all sort of there is no withdrawal because I'm not retiring as of now, right? So this is what I mean when I talk about earmarking. What I'm saying is setting aside, or sort of clearly defining what portion of your portfolio is meant for what goal.
Got it. And for example, there are about 5 types of investors. One is the riskiest, then moderate, a really passive kind of investor, and the two in between of that. So what kind of like, how do I know, I can take on risk? Am I a riskier investor, or should I just stick to a normal index fund, or should I just try to beat inflation with debt?
So the only way for you to know this is start investing. Just take your money and start investing. If you are forced to look at your portfolio each day over and over again, and you feel if you feel the butterflies in your stomach, you know for a fact that you are a risk-averse investor. You cannot assume a lot of risk. So it just happens by practicing. And oftentimes when I started investing, even I used to go revisit my portfolio over and over again. Now I really don't care. I've just deleted my Demat account app from my phone, and I reinstall it once every month, and that too not to check my portfolio but only to invest. And oftentimes I just even use my desktop, so I don't really have my crypto app or my Demat account on my phone as of now. So that just ensures that this helped me realize that I'm a very, very risky investor. Like I can invest in extremely risky assets and don't give a fuck about them. It really doesn't matter to me because I know for a fact that the assets that I've invested in are high quality, and time span of 1 month will really not affect me a lot. It wouldn't matter. Even if it crashed, it wouldn't matter. Even if it became a multi-bagger of sorts, it wouldn't matter because my investment horizon is at least a decade. And when you do that, you yourself understand of what type of investor you are and what's your risk profile.
Actually, I totally resonate with that. Even I invested in crypto and in stocks, and I don't know what's going on in the market. I don't know about any news. I don't even check the portfolio value of that. And also, like coming back on this, I invested recently on behalf of my grandfather in a simple index fund, of course, for him. And every day he is like, "Beta kitne hue? Beta kitna बढ़ गया?" So why do you think that behavior arises, and what can be, for example, if I am that kind of a person who who's every day checks his phone, that how is my portfolio? So what kind of assets or what should I do to create wealth? Because obviously I'm very risk averse that way. So I'll rather not invest in crypto or in riskier stocks. So what assets do I use to create wealth?
In that case, I think the best for you is just an index fund, because oftentimes we get subjected to FOMO when we see others making a lot of money, and others, what's happening to others directly affects our psyche. Now, what an index fund does is it sort of tracks the whole market itself. So the likelihood of you losing a lot of money will only happen when the whole market is crashing and when a lot of people are losing money. So it won't matter to you. Same way, if others are making a lot of money, it won't matter because the whole market is only going up, right? So in that case, for you to have some sort of exposure to equity as an asset class and create wealth, but at the same time being risk averse, puts you in a basket wherein index funds, let's say, are perfect for you, like literally perfect. And again, looking at the portfolio each day will not really make a difference because you don't become rich by investing in index in a day, a month, or even a year. It takes at least a decade. So if you don't have a decade-long horizon, if you don't have a decade-long vision, just don't invest at all. And I think having a decade-long vision is more important than knowing which is the most awesome company to invest in. Because it won't matter even if you find the most awesome company, but being a very shallow-minded guy, as soon as the price dropped, you move out. You're gonna miss out on a lot of huge gains you would have incurred had you stayed invested.
That actually happens, that over the internet you would have seen people saying that had you invested in 2010 Netflix, you would have 20,000 times the gains now. But what they should really focus on is that Netflix often had 50%, 80% drops, but the people who had the balls to stay invested at that time, or not the balls, just they had the logic, like they believed in the business, those were the ones who actually made this much money. And it's like, it's often not paid much attention to that. If you cannot hold down the bad cycle of the bear market, you probably shouldn't invest in that volatile of a fund. And secondly, like obviously, like we are in a bull market to the point it's almost overvalued by Shiller PE ratio and everything. So what do you suggest, like how do I invest in a bull market and how do I invest in a bear market?
So my investing doesn't get affected by either bull or bear market. It doesn't matter to me whether the market is overvalued or not, because I'm not investing in market. I'm investing in these specific companies, right? And let's say 10 days down the line, the stock that is in my watch list drops significantly. Even if the market is overvalued, I'll still invest in it because it doesn't matter to me whether market is overvalued or not. I'm investing in that. Same goes for bear markets. Even if the market is tanking, but I have a really high quality asset which hasn't tanked, I won't start investing more into this because the price itself has remained the same, right? So I think that is how you should approach. It doesn't matter where the market is going and where it isn't, unless you are an index investor, right? But yes, another thing, you should be comfortable at the price at which you're entering, right? Asian Paints is an awesome company, but it's trading at 90 PE. are you comfortable investing in a company at 90 PE? If you are, just go ahead. Doesn't matter it's a bull market, bear market. If you aren't, even if it's a bear market, don't invest. Just wait for a correction. And it doesn't mean that you're trying to time the market. It's a matter of whether or not you're comfortable with the price point. If you are, then invest. If you aren't, then don't. Then it least matters bear, bull, consolidation, whatnot.
That's perfectly put. Also, what about like penny stocks? Like, what I've noticed is that there are a lot of stories that many people have made fortunes from investing in penny stocks, and they've made it big. Rakesh Jhunjhunwala being one of them. And what happened is that like I'm on a daily schedule of posting reels, and about four or five people have actually who were following the DM so invited the request suggest some penny stocks or something like that, so I can get rich quick overnight. So what are penny stocks, what is the mentality behind it, and what is its significance, what are its features?
Well, yeah, a penny stock can be easily identified as somebody whose market price is less than, let's say, 10 rupees, whose market price is basically single digits. And people often feel that since it's a single digit priced asset, it can easily go up. Something which is stupid. A 10 rupee stock going to 20 is equal to a 100 rupee stock going to 200, or a 1,000 rupees going to 2,000. Well, it's maths.
Yeah.
It's 100% gain. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter 10 से 20 जा रहा है कि क्या. So it's basic maths. Oftentimes these stocks are operator driven. Oftentimes smart big money invest in these stocks, drive up the price, create FOMO, wait for retailers to catch up. As soon as retailers catch up, they just sell it off at extremely high prices, making their quick money and leaving all these
retail investors at loss.
Absolutely. If not at loss, at extremely high prices, which were never justified. So I I just stay away from forever. As I said, my investment process is very first is my financial analysis screen. Oftentimes, my screen is so strict that I don't allow any penny stock entering my screen. So it doesn't matter what the price is. Oftentimes, penny stocks are extremely depressed companies. So since my investment process doesn't allow any extremely depressed companies, I really don't have to worry about investing in penny stocks because they never just reach my watch list for that matter.
Also, one more thing about financial goal planning is that, for example, let us say 7 years later, 8 years later, I'm going to buy a car. Okay. And now I've invested in equity and I'm hoping that today is 10 lakhs. After 5 years become 35 lakhs or 30 lakhs. Okay. Or even 20 lakhs. Or for example, I missed my goal. For example, I wanted 20 lakhs, but I did not hit that. I did not hit that mark. Then what should I proceed on?
So I think it's important for you to realize that you should set realistic expectations. That's very important, right? Extremely important. And also be conservative in that sense. So if you know for a fact that maybe your expectation is extremely high, you should also try investing more money. Rather than depending upon we all know that future value ka formula is investment amount 1 plus R raised to the power n. You know for a fact that your n is 10 years. R aapko pata nahi. So the thing that you can focus is more on the amount that you're investing, the A. So if you don't know, you know for a fact that R is volatile. You don't know zyada return milega kam. But what you do know is how much money will you invest. If you can just tweak that amount to a little higher, you can ensure reaching your goals. So if things do not set well, you can obviously follow this approach, but more ideal would be not setting extremely high expectations of the return that you can earn, because 20% return though is achievable but not realistic. Just because it's achievable doesn't mean कि मिलेगा ही मिलेगा. It's possible during extremely bull markets, or let's say you've been extremely lucky, but again, it's not a realistic goal to aspire for.
Right, and also talking about the the A part, getting more money pattern. Also, on the previous thing which you mentioned is multiple income streams. So I personally believe that these 4 to 5 years of college are the best time to at least start making multiple streams of income. If they end up being one or not, that's a different thing. So in what ways like can a student start building multiple streams of income, or where can he or she start with?
Absolutely. So I've identified three different sources of income. One is obviously job, trying to trade time for money. You could do that even in college by interning with all these organizations, right? So it's totally up to you. How do you do that? I did that, and yeah, I still do. Second source of income is creating assets. When I talk about assets, this can be a blog that you write, a YouTube channel that you can have, people like you and me, or you making digital assets. Fine. Let's say an app for that matter. Then, rather than creating assets, you can buy assets. Now, when I talk about buying assets, I'm basically saying investing. So there are three different ways how you can start accumulating money. So yeah, I think you should approach any sort of activity you do using this lens. And ideally, you should not trade time for money. The first step is very generic, very orthodox. Try creating assets. Have a blog, maybe. Just try to monetize any skill that you have, so that you can have a recurring flow of income coming in from future. So that is super important, and that only happens if you as a college student are extremely curious to learn new things. And once you do start learning new things, all these opportunities pop up like this. You don't really have to find them, let's say, per se. You just come up with all these ideas and then start executing upon them. Sooner or later, these assets will reap you extremely good benefits in future.
Right, totally. And a thing which I'd like to point out is that I have mostly the age group of my friends has been people who are older than me, and that has been an unfair advantage because the mistakes they are making then I come to know 5 years early. And the thing which I noticed is that for most people what happens is they turn 25, 30, and they don't find their work fulfilling, and at that time they start pursuing different professions or starting different incomes. So how can a student start at least trying for it, at least trying to make money from different streams of income, when the common notion is that we are 20, we are 19, enjoy, and actually most of us give it to peer pressure that what will my friends say.
Okay, I get it. So yeah, the best way for you to approach this hypothetical situation would be to start doing it anyway, right? And only if you enjoy the process. So when I said you starting a blog, right, you don't really have to start a blog for the sake of it. Let's say you're extremely interested in reading a very niche sort of comic books. Let's say you specialize in the Nordic mythology, the Thors and the Odins of comic world, right? So you can, just because you really love doing it, you can just redirect your efforts into not just reading them but also creating content with that regard. And believe me, you'll be able to monetize it. So as far as you being influenced by peer pressure comes, it won't really matter because you really are enjoying the process. And second important point is also that you're starting early, because the earlier you start, the sooner you realize that you eventually will make a lot of mistakes. It's ideal that you make those mistakes as soon as possible so that you can work upon them as soon as possible. And by the time you leave college, you already are way ahead of your peers who never bothered doing anything for that matter. And I think that is how you should approach this whole situation in a very positive way.
So being 18 and 19, in this podcast we will covered very basic structure of financial planning and investing and everything. So how do I actually start? How do I gain knowledge and actually begin down this path?
Right. So it's important for you to understand first. You first understand the importance of it, because you just don't want to start learning about it because, let's say, others are saying so, because you can earn a lot of money. Your intention of starting it should come from within, so that you can stick to the path throughout. And then when it comes to, let's say, start learning about it, there are a lot of free resources, like a lot of them. You are creating videos, I am creating videos. YouTube is filled with all these topics. There are a lot of books written. All that you have to do is go search on a Google top finance in personal finance books. You'll see a list of those. Once you start reading them, you'll start realizing ki, acha, okay, now this guy talks about this. This is interesting. I need to read more about it. Either I can read a lot of articles about this, or maybe a whole book altogether just on this. ठीक है. So you start developing that branch of knowledge, that tree of knowledge, जो अलग अलग चीजों पे फोकस करती रहेगी. And eventually by the time you've read enough books, enough articles, and consumed a lot of content, you'll realize that you have become, if not an expert, at least well versed in all these concepts. Even if you never actually pursued it academically or professionally, you never taught financial literacy in your college, in an engineering college, or anywhere for that matter. But approaching this whole process in a very positive way, you can actually learn a lot. The way you did, the way I did. I do not have finance, even though I'm an accounting major, I do not have finance as a subject. You being an engineering major, you don't have finance. Maybe किसी semester में होगा, but you won't be professionally taught. Right? How did you learn it? You also learned it using very simple things, books, podcasts, and the curiosity within to know more about something that interested you. So any person can start this using this simple approach that I have.
Right. And also, like, what are the steps to review my investments if they are, about to match my financial goals, or is something gone wrong? How do I like review my long-term goals and investments and everything?
So your goals are going to be intact, right? But what's important is you reviewing your investments. So for you to review, don't depend upon anybody else. Since you've made the decision, it should be you who will be reviewing it. And also, the only way for you to review it is when you truly understand the nature of things that you've invested in. If you're invested in equity and you're invested in businesses, for you to know whether or not sahi chal raha hai ki nahi, it should not depend upon the price. It should depend upon business fundamentals. Till the time business fundamentals are good and your goal is still far away, doesn't matter price ऊपर है नीचे है क्या है, just stick to it, right? And this is how you can review any sort of investment. ठीक है? Just base your decision based on fundamentals and not the price, because oftentimes price movements can be extremely volatile and extremely irrational as well. Many times you do not want to base a decision based on price, but solely on the reason why you invested in that asset and whether or not your investment thesis is playing out. And that only happens when you know when you in what you've invested. अगर किसी stock tip के basis पे you've invested, you'll never know the rationale because XYZ person said it's a good stock, so I'll just buy. That's not a way how you should approach it.
Right. That's actually really well put. Let's wrap it up. Okay. Thank you, Kashish, for joining me today. Honestly, this is a really value-adding podcast. And I actually believe that, for everyone watching this, especially if they are youth, this would actually get them intrigued into this world of finance. And once you get in, it's like a rabbit hole. There's no getting out there.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Rohan.
Anytime. Thank you, man. Thank you, Kashish. Goodbye.